Hi, and welcome to meatrabbits.org. Today we're talking harvest size, harvest weight, harvest age. So the big question, when should you harvest your meat rabbits? There are several different opinions on this, but first of all, let's say this straight off. There is no wrong time to harvest your meat rabbits. There's no time when you can't harvest a meat rabbit. Young, old, retired breeder, they can all be harvested. It just comes down to a matter of what you like, what you prefer, what you want in size, what you like in texture from an animal, which will change at different ages. Also things like feed efficiency, the amount of work and time you want to keep on feeding these animals, because let's face it, your time's an investment that should feed into that efficiency factor as well. So the most common time you're going to see stated to harvest your meat rabbits is 10 to 12 weeks or 5 pounds. That's kind of typical. It's kind of the most typical if you were marketing rabbit. So that might be another consideration. Are you selling any rabbit meat? Is this just for your home? If you're marketing it, you kind of need to gear towards those customers and what they're expecting. And that would typically be that 5 pound young rabbit around that maybe 8 to 12 week, usually a 10 to 12 week age. That's what they'd be mostly expecting to see. That is not the age I personally harvest my rabbits. I harvest my rabbits at 16 weeks. So what we're looking at here is a New Zealand that is just about 16 weeks, and I just weighed this rabbit, and this rabbit is weighing in at 8.5 pounds. So that's a really nice weight. That's an excellent rate of growth for this rabbit. If I were to process this rabbit today, I would expect to get at least 50% of that in dressed carcass. And actually, I typically do a little better than that. Good quality rabbits, you should get more like a 55 to 60% yield. A lot of that depends on your lines, and that's one of those things that you can track and breed for and select for in your breeding program. But in the meantime, those ones that might be a little off your growth curve, they taste just as good and are just as worth harvesting too. And that's actually how you build a great line of meat rabbits, is by culling and harvesting the ones that aren't performing as well as you want to keep the good ones for the breeders. So that's a 16 week. If we look over here, I've just weighed these. These are 10 going on 11 weeks, and they are weighing in at 4.5 pounds. These are Californians, and I will say they're the slowest growing rabbits in my rabbitry. But to give you an idea, this is what a 4.5 going on 5 pound rabbit would look like. That's quite a difference in body size, the size of the cuts of meats you're getting off of them. All of this comes into play when you're deciding what's right for you and when you want to harvest your meat. So for me personally, I mean, I wouldn't call this a scrawny rabbit because that wouldn't be fair. But, another 1/2 pound of meat on that, and that rabbit is harvestable size. But those cuts on that are still going to be pretty thin and slim. I prefer the much bigger, meatier cuts on something like this 8 pound rabbit over here. So the real reason that I'm harvesting at 16 weeks as opposed to the 10 to 12 week is we're a big family. I feel that it takes me only about an extra month to get to a size like this, and for that the amount of meat I'm getting is significant. Now some people will say, and it may be true, that the feed efficiency ratio, that equation, works out the most efficiently at say like 10 to 12 weeks and 5 pounds. But to me, I'm willing to lose just a little bit in my efficiency value to put more meat on the rabbit. I'm getting in that 4 week time. I feel like I'm getting basically another 3/4 of an animal off of this. I also do a lot of cutting and grinding into cuts. So when I would butcher this animal, those thigh cuts, those leg cuts, I'm getting a nice big hunk of meat, getting a decent hunk of meat off of that one, but nothing like the same. And then like you know, over your saddle in those, it's going to be a much thinner piece of muscle on the 5-pounders than it is in this. So again, goes back to things like what are you going to do with it? You know, really consider how you want to cook it. Now, I've cooked these 16-week rabbits. Honestly, I've cooked rabbits older than this that didn't quite make it into my breeding program, but I maybe grew them to 20 or 24 weeks to find that. And that meat, I have never found it what I would call tough, you know, especially if you compare it to a tough piece of beef. It's just not like that. It's more like a tougher piece of chicken at those ages. But at 16 weeks, I find nothing tough about this. Some people do say that they actually don't think of the young, like the 12-week-olds, as being tender as much as they're unfirm and kind of towards the point of mushy. Now, if you are going to get into grinds and sausage and cutting and trimming off, then working with a firmer meat is really going to be a lot better for you in terms of yield, but actually just physically working with the meat is a lot better too. So these and other considerations are all things to think about when you're deciding when to harvest your animals. You know, think about, how do you cook them? Do you like to stew things? Do you like to fry, saute? Do you want something more tender, or does it not matter because you're going to, say, do a lot of crock potting, or maybe Instapot's your thing? You know, put some thought into that, because if, you know, growing an older animal and cooking it that way anyway, then you're just never even going to notice the difference in the texture. So again, all things to think about. If you come over to the website at meatrabbits.org, we have a much more thorough conversation in the guide, the accompanying article that goes with this, that will give you even more details and more things to think about. But those are the basics. You know, remember, number one, there's no wrong time to harvest them. It is a matter of personal preference, and you're only going to know that by trying some things out. Harvest some at a young age, harvest them more towards 16 weeks, and see what you like and what works out better for you. Maybe do some math. Look at how much feed you put into them to get in there. Do the math and figure out how much per pound that meat cost you. So again, you know, all different considerations. No wrong answer. You can harvest at any age. The two most typical ages you're going to harvest at are either in the 10 to 12 week range or in the 16-week range. One final thing to mention is that if you do intend to use the pelts, if you want to tan the pelts, you need to go out to at least 16 weeks, because the skin is too soft, too supple on the young rabbits, and it won't tan. It won't be a usable hide. So if a true dual purpose meat rabbit is your goal, you definitely need to go to the 16 weeks. Questions, comments, conversation, respectfully done, are all welcome in the comments section. Again, I hope you'll go over to meatrabbits.org and read through the more thorough accompanying article. And I hope you have good luck with your meat rabbits.